folks! So whether you are new to Dungeons & Dragons or you've been playing for a little bit but want a refresher, we are starting a Intro to D&D series. We're going to have a couple videos in it. First off, we are starting off with a really basic introduction. So what is Dungeons & Dragons? Dungeons & Dragons is a fantasy role-playing game. You're playing as a character in a fantasy world full of magic and dragons and monsters and other characters that you get to interact with. Now, a role-playing game, there are basic rules to provide a guideline for how things happen, but it's kind of sky's the limit. If you can imagine it, you can figure out how to tell that story or have that thing happen that you want to do. Like in role-playing video games, you'll get the kind of different options that you can do or say. This is the same kind of thing, but instead of having 3 or 4 different options you can pick from that will branch off into different things, there's no branch for you to decide from. It's completely up to you. So let's introduce some key terms you should know. First of all, the Game Master, or in Dungeons & Dragons as it's known, the Dungeon Master. This is the person that's going to be running the game. They know the story, they know kind of where things are going, whether they are running a homebrew, which is something that you come up with on your own, or a module, which is something that provides a guideline of here's the story, here are the stats, here are a couple of different options for your Dungeon Master to follow along. Another point of note is the Dungeon Master also makes ultimate decisions on rulings. So if something is not clear in the book one way or the other, or if your group decides, oh, we want to have a homebrew rule, it's ultimately the Dungeon Master who kind of is the final say. They have the veto. I usually suggest that Dungeon Masters keep in mind what their players' input, but ultimately the Dungeon Master helps make the decision just to move the game along, and so you don't spend hours debating one tiny rule instead of jumping back into your adventure. The Dungeon Master also will play all of the monsters, taking over their roles in combat or just as you run across them, as well as NPCs or non-player characters. This is everyone in the world except for the players. The PCs are the player characters, the characters who are played by the folks sitting around the table. So you will come up with a character. We'll get a little bit more into how to create a character in a later video, but ultimately you pick a race, you pick a class, and then you pick some background info and pick out items and stuff like that. Your PC will level up as you gain experience point or XP. You will get new abilities related to what class you pick, and you will also gather gold and other things to buy new items. Now in Dungeons & Dragons and a lot of tabletop RPGs, the rules provide you the guidelines for how to play the game. So ability checks, attack damage, all these things are determined by rolling dice. A standard set has a d20, 2 d10s, a d12, a d8, a d6, and a d4. The D refers to dice and then the number of sides that it has. So a d20 has 20 sides. The d20 is the one that you're going to want to be most familiar with because you're going to be using it the most. It's what you roll for ability checks, attack rolls, and most of the rolls you make within the game are going to be with the d20. And this is how you determine how successful you are at what you were attempting to do. So you say, I want to try and climb this rope. The DM tells you, okay, roll a strength roll. We'll get into all of the different abilities in a second. And you make a roll. The DM will have figured out what the DC is, the difficulty check. You roll the d20 and add whatever modifier applies. The DM will be able to let you know which modifier you need to use for the situation. So rolling the dice is how we determine how successful you are. Whether you succeed, whether you fail, whether you kind of succeed if you're right above the DC of the check. It's what adds a little bit of chance and excitement to the game, because if you succeeded at everything, it wouldn't be as interesting. Alright, so what are these abilities? There are 6 base abilities that all of your ability checks are going to be based on. There's Strength, Dexterity, and Constitution, which are more on the physical end of the abilities. And then you have Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma on the mental side of abilities. And beyond that, you can specialize in certain skills that fall in subclasses of these abilities. For example, Performance is based off of Charisma. So you can have your Charisma score, and then if you are trained in Performance, you would also add in the Performance score to that to get that total number. Another important term you'll probably want to know is HP, and this is how much health your character has. In Dungeons & Dragons, there are a variety of different classes you can be. Some do have magical abilities, and spells are kind of their own thing. We can get into that in a little bit, but that is one of the unique things about Dungeons & Dragons is it is a fantasy role-playing game, so there's magic, there's elves, there's dragons. All you need to play Dungeons & Dragons is a group of people. One of them will be the Dungeon Master, the rest will be players, and then you need dice, pens, some paper, character sheets, and the rule books. Now you can start off with the starter set, which will have everything you need, including some pre-generated characters. So if you want to jump in without having to go through the character generation, that's a great place to start. Otherwise, you will need the 3 books that are in the background, if I can find them. The Dungeon Master will want to have the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, and the players will want to have the Player's Handbook, and that gives you everything you need to know for a basic Dungeons & Dragons games. Now there are a lot more supplements. You can go on the Dungeon Masters Guild and find a ton more stuff you can add in, but the basic thing you need are just those 3 books, some dice, friends, and a couple hours to sit around and have some fun. A lot of folks like to play Dungeons & Dragons using miniatures and grids, but that is not necessarily. You can do Theater of the Mind, which is just imagination. It's you describing what you want to do and the Dungeon Master describing what the outcome is, what happens. So there is the basis for what is D&D, what are kind of some basic stats, some basic terms that you should know before jumping in. In the next video, I will talk you through how to create a character using 5th edition, and in future episodes we'll go through things like combat and exploration, and if you're interested, I can branch this out into more and more stuff. So for folks who have been playing D&D for a while, what's your top piece of advice for new players? And for new players, what do you want to see out of videos like this? If there's any other specific video ideas on this kind of intro to D&D, let me know down in the comments below and we can work on adding those in for you. I want to say thanks to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/roll4initiative, especially Sean, Arby, Lainey, Bryce, and Joan. If you're interested in becoming a patron of ours and picking up some cool perks like early videos or some kind of bonus behind the scenes looks, you can head on over to our Patreon page and check out the different pledge levels. But really, thanks to all of you who watch. We make these videos for you folks and really enjoy all the conversations we have here in the YouTube comments, over on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, kind of at all the various socials we are on. Don't forget to comment down below, like and share the video, and go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any videos, but we do make videos here every Tuesday and Thursdays. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! Dungeons and Dragons.